Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Back in Britain Live, our 6th event today with Richard Franklin from Airbus. So just before we get started and I hand you over to Richard, I just wanted to make sure you're aware of everything that's going to go on today and tell you a little bit more about Richard himself as well. So Richard Franklin is the Managing Director of Airbus Defence and Space and the Head of Secure Communications in the UK. Richard has been part of the team at Airbus for 5 years now and has recently been appointed UK Managing Director alongside being Head of Secure Communications. He continues to lead the Secure Communications business line, which includes the UK's MOD's Skynet 5 secure military satellite communications contract, as well as all the secure communications activities across Airbus. Today we'll focus on the strength for space manufacturing and the vital role of the UK supply chain. So today Richard's speech will be around 30 minutes and then we will allow 10 to 15 minutes at the end for any questions you may have. Please leave any questions in the Q&A area that you'll see in the bottom bar of your Zoom call. So welcome again, and I'll pass you over to Richard now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak today. Much appreciated. As Yasmin said, I'm the UK MD for Airbus Defence and Space. And before I get into the main topic, I thought it was just orientate people onto Airbus. Most people know Airbus for the aeroplanes which you all fly on to your holidays, which unfortunately many of you won't have been able to do this year. But we have 3 business lines, and if we go to the next slide, please, Yasmin. In UK, it's very much around aeroplanes manufacture, and in particular wings, but also helicopters and the business that I run, defence and space. Overall in UK, 13,500 workforce and supporting roughly 110,000 jobs in UK. We're very spread over UK, slightly southern dominated, I have to say, but a wide footprint around, and particularly into Wales as well. Due to our size and the fact that we're very much an innovation-driven company, we have a big early careers, apprentice, very technical-based sort of foundation to the business. Overall, we spend a huge proportion of what we have as revenue in the UK with supply chain. Whilst we are a large prime, everything is supported and comes from the supply chain, which is just critical for us in every aspect of what we do. Overall, adding about 7.8 billion of contribution to the UK. And I think, critical in all of that is innovation is at the heart of everything we do. And as I talk through some of the other topics later on, particularly around space manufacturing, you'll see it is the R&D and that critical engineering mindset and sort of workforce that we have that really underpins the Airbus business and our values. And next slide, please. So just looking today very much at defence and space, before I get into the core space aspects, we have a very strong cyber business driven out of Newport, where we make high-grade crypto and sort of secure SOCs. We also have a thriving intelligence business, largely driven by our own fleet of satellite imagery and the analysis of it. In UK, it's particularly that analysis, but also support to programs such as the Home Office. The helicopters, very much about mission support and converting helicopters down in Oxford into mission-ready capabilities. And many of you will have seen our helicopters in the police and other activities, but also for MOD with the Puma 2. If I look more at space, then we have what we would call commercial space and science space and manufacture. Yasmin mentioned Skynet earlier. That's our PFI with UK government, which has been a very long running and underpinning 15 years so far, and another couple of years still to go, where we provide all of beyond line of sight communications to the MOD. We also have SSTL, which is a wholly owned subsidiary based out of Guildford, specializing small to medium satellites and particularly supporting programs such as Galileo. As we have the manufacturing in UK, we also support from a services perspective after build, and services is very much a underpinning part of the business and growing sector. As I said, the Skynet has been very much a build and operate, and then, is there a sound? And then from there on, we, very much with our military air, the A400, where yes, the build is partially in UK, but the operate down in Brize Norton, critical, and our consortia for air tanker, the MRTT, also operating there. If I look though at the bottom of that picture, you see Skynet 5, but also OneWeb. The environment which we thrive in space is a harsh environment and very long, very difficult terrain to build, design, and launch, and then to operate over years. You've seen constellations such as OneWeb, hopefully in the press, also SpaceX with their Starlink. The move to provide more ubiquitous connectivity, broadband, with LEO constellations has been the step change, and that's driven also a large change in the manufacturing techniques, which we all have to move and look forward to. A typical telecom satellite has been a 2 to 3 year build. Now, in a OneWeb constellation or a Starlink, people are making 1 to 2 per day. Those changes are critical to the new digital way of operating, but also that sort of mindset to high throughput and very automated and computerized design through to build much shorter timescales to get through that design, but also then to implement and produce. And in a constellation, we're talking anything from 800 to 3,000, as opposed to 3 or 4 in a normal network. And next slide, please, Yasmin. So if I now focus much more on some of our space and try and really excite you about what is happening. Back one, please, Yasmin. Perfect. The solar orbiter one, please, Yasmin. That's great. Solar orbiter, hopefully some of you will have seen in the press this year. This was one of our first examples of that I'm going to talk through today, of cutting edge technology. And this really is at the forefront of science and manufacture. And this mission is basically, how close can you get to the sun and take imagery and sensory data, relay it to Earth effectively without melting the very spacecraft that you're on. The build, just to give you a concept of scale, 1.5 million man hours with over 200,000 man hours of assembly. That, most people will see that so much of that therefore has been in the initial design, the testing, proportionately, it's sort of, about 1/7 the actual build versus the design and the testing period. So huge focus on that. How do we make it work? Putting it in perspective, currently 240 million kilometers from Earth, or between Mercury and Venus, and trying to take different angles of the sun, which is why it's in a strange orbit. A normal spacecraft, to give you an idea of complexity, would be plus or minus 150 degrees temperature. Solar orbiter is, as you can see on the side there, 600 degrees C on the front, minus 180 degrees C on the back. That's a huge extreme for us to manage. And so the first thing the team needed to do was create a new heat shield, something called solar black, made from burnt crushed animal bone, a little bit like clever china. They then had to work out how to attach it because normal glues wouldn't work, and therefore had to create a special Velcro just to attach the heat shields. But then, I guess, is where the real hard stuff happens. You don't need a spacecraft unless you've got sensors. And we really needed to be able to look through the heat shields with the sensors and protect them, yet still see in a perfect vision the actual sun itself. So firstly, they needed to be extraordinarily clean. If there's any water vapors at all near optics or UV sensors, they would create severe damage. But also the electrical cleanliness. There has to be absolutely an invisible electromagnetic field to those sensors, so the only thing that it can see is the sun. No part can be ungrounded. Every material has to be demagnetized. It is essential that we remagnetize at any point. We have to start the whole demagnetization process again. So testing, as you can imagine, was extraordinarily exacting. And until the data, though, comes back, and this is our challenge with all these missions, we spend years and years developing and then building. putting on a rocket in extremely harsh environments. And this is only when you finally start to get the first messages back that you really know if it's been a success or not. And I'm pleased to say, and again, I think you may have seen in the press some of the pictures, but we are seeing the first images, which I hope anyone that has seen some are absolutely amazing, and long may those keep coming back. If I go on to the next slide, please, Yasmin. Quite a different mission, this one, the Mars Rover. So rather than a satellite taking imagery, this is the Mars Rover. It was due to launch this summer. Unfortunately, whilst we were ready with the actual rover, other matters weren't quite ready in the whole launch chain. So it was unfortunately unable to launch this summer. But effectively, it's an autonomous vehicle to land on Mars. So launch from a rocket and then parachute down to the Mars surface. And the idea is to take samples. Again, to give you a perspective, 1.3 million man-hours to design and build, with 9 experiments on board. Weight is critical in space. Every ton or every kilo costs a fortune and creates mass in the rocket. So the aim is always to minimize the size and the weight of everything we try and do. So key focus on here, and the whole mission is only 300 kilos, which when you compare even with your small car, something that can go to Mars, drill, take samples and navigate is quite an astounding feat. But also, what's so hard about this? Firstly, again, temperature or cleanliness. We're going there to discover life on Mars, prove whether there's water and other such minerals. The first thing we have to therefore make sure is that there are no parts of Earth or the people building it anywhere. So we do not want to be discovering stevenage on Mars. Therefore, we had to design an ultra-clean environment. It's solar powered, but unlike normal solar power, this has to withstand minus 150 degrees C. And also, it's in a very dusty environment, so it has to be self-cleaning. I mentioned it's autonomous. Now, we've seen autonomy on Earth, we see UAVs. That in itself isn't very clever nowadays. The difference on Mars, of course, though, is there is no GPS, there are no maps, there are no navigation systems whatsoever. So you need something that can create its own visual maps and then teach itself to navigate fully autonomously with no or very, very little control or update from Earth. That takes a huge amount of power and skill to be done in a computer that does not have much power and has to operate in very extreme environments. So an amazing amount of decoding to make it as simple as possible, yet able to operate in the most complex environment. The wheels, the 6 wheels, it can also walk as well as roll, and the wheels are specially designed in a mix of many metals to allow that flexibility to grip in these very loose and difficult surface environments. So 1.2 kilowatts of power available, assuming we do clean the dust. The central body, because of this computing and the heat up there in the day, has to be very, very well thermally isolated. And to do that, a lot of gold is used and a number of custom connectors to pass electricity that don't produce heat. Dispersing heat in space is extremely challenging. As much as you have huge temperature differences, actually expending your heat becomes a core part of the design. So if you thought that was quite hard, and believe me, drilling to 2 meters in Mars from a rover is going to be hard, we have just also been awarded the Mars Fetch rover, and the challenge of that is to build, again, another autonomous rover that will collect the samples of the US NASA rover that is on its way to Mars at the moment and bring them back to a rocket that will be sat on the Mars surface, which will then launch up into space and will be collected by another cargo satellite to bring back to Earth. So very much like your Martian movie, It is all now in the planning to genuinely bring the samples back, having blasted back off Mars, whereas at the moment all missions have stayed on Mars. So a huge step forward, another very exciting project for us in UK. And I think the key theme I'm just trying to bring out of these is the amazing amount of innovation that is being drawn together across UK here to achieve these missions. Now they are international, it's not purely UK, but this is a mixture of universities, SMEs, large corporates as well, all bringing their very best to solve what are unique and first-time problems. Very little of this has been done before, and the idea of these experimental visits is to drive the technology on forwards as fast as possible, so we can then utilize that in the more commercial space missions, these new constellations, and really drive forward what we are capable of to support, the more normal operations on Earth. So if I go to the next slide, please, Yasmin. So slightly closer to home, we mentioned Skynet 5. Skynet 5 is the beyond line of sight communications which built on Skynet 4. And they are 4 big geostationary satellites, so sat at 36,000 kilometers. They were designed 14, 15 years ago and are becoming end of life. We have therefore just been awarded the contract by the UK MOD to build Skynet 6A, which is the next in this generation of capability. The key differential for a military satellite is the fact that it has to be capable of aggressive attack, particularly jamming, but also other key features. They are large satellites, 5.5 to 6 tons because of some of the shielding that they have on. One of the big differences for us on 6A and a real plus for UK is that it will for the first time be integrated and fully built in the UK. And as part of that, the Oxford establishment, RAL, is upgrading its capabilities, supported by UK government with a £100 million grant, to allow that testing of very large satellites. Today, their testing capabilities in the UK is for smaller satellites, but this is that step up, which will give UK really world-class testing capability for all the interesting programs that we're looking at across the UK. Launch is planned in 2025, again, 1,500 man-years of effort to get us there. So again, a lot of that's in design development, that's a full 4 or 5 year cycle. To be efficient, we do use commercial platform and then we adapt that. So that's something we really try and leverage and use the best of the day-to-day manufacturing techniques and then effectively add particular packages and adaptation to make it really key. In Airbus, the UK is the home of processing. So even though we manufacture also in France, Germany, and in Spain, UK and particularly Stevenage is where we really do all our R&D on the core processor, and this will have the latest processing on Skynet 6A. But I'm pleased to say it also will include input from 40 SMEs. As I said, we have a big reliance on supply chain. Airbus can't specialize and do everything. So we will be using a number of support contracts as well as the outsource of the testing down in RAL. One of the critical design differences, of course, though, is the hardening and shielding, and we'll end up adding probably an extra ton of shielding to make this a very resilient and therefore heavy satellite, but all the stronger for it. And again, the huge sort of export opportunity from this, staying at the cutting edge of these military satellites, allows us to look for opportunities. At the moment, Australia is looking to update its military SATCOM with up to 4 satellites. So we'll be hoping to work with UK government, particularly BAYS and some of the team there for that ongoing support. Next slide, please. So hopefully I've given you a real flavour of the innovation, what I would call bespoke and exquisite manufacturer. But I think we can't have any presentation at the moment without mentioning COVID. It was really pleasing for us to see how we managed to take much of our manufacturing skills and expertise and help to some of the COVID-19 responses. And in particular, for the the aero manufacturing teams at Broughton, helping host the manufacture and design of the 15,000 ventilators, the Ventilator Challenge. That was a hugely different type of manufacturing. Normally they're building wings each day, and suddenly it was as part of a larger consortia, work to a design and print of a completely different type of product. We also, in our Portsmouth factory, started making visors using our 3D printing machines to support some of the Portsmouth area trusts, and put together some local authority mobile phone networks. We also were making masks. The A400 was put to some very unique tasks. And also the satellites for the military were given, so we gave away a lot of free capacity to the MOD so that the troops could keep in contact with their families during these difficult times. And I think for me, it was just a real eye-opener to say, how can UK turn our hand to a very different type of manufacturing? It just shows that the core underlying strengths and techniques and missions are all the same once you just get your heads in a room and all work together. If I jump to the next slide, please. Yasmin, could I have the next slide? Fabulous. This is my last slide, and I just wanted to talk through a little bit on our supply chain. I've mentioned, whether it's in our aero or our helicopters, our supply chain is critical, and we couldn't make any of our products without a very vibrant, I could say rich supply chain, but very diverse and all at the cutting edge. We spent 350 million on R&D in the UK this year, and in the different parts of the business, we spend a lot. We don't spend all of that ourselves, we spend much of that with supply chain as well. So we do need the supply chain. We have a very strong SME partnership approach. In UK, we have 2,000 approved suppliers, as you can see on the chart here, widely distributed. This is making everything from carbon satellite terminals through to wing parts, through to processor parts on payloads. So hugely diverse range of supply chain, and it is key during these difficult times that also that supply chain is there for the future. And I think the aeroplane example, if I go back to aeroplanes just for a moment, no one's going to take delivery of an aeroplane unless it has every part on board. Our craft, whether they be satellites, helicopters, are mission critical, safety critical, and we need to make sure that all of the parts are there, tested, and to the same standards. So it is really, really important to us, and hopefully many of you have engaged with us in the past. During COVID, we've tried to support where we can supply chain by making sure orders keep coming or trickle through even on a reduced basis. And MOD has been very positive in the support to us of payments, in terms of making sure even if projects have been delayed, that we and therefore can pass through to our supply chain. I was also pleased that last year we managed to get accredited on the prompt payment scheme, so sort of showing that we're pushing down what we receive from government through the supply chain. One of the other questions that was sort of raised by Yasmin, just to mention, was we've seen support coming through in France and in Germany for aerospace, whether that be aero itself or actually in the more traditional space market, and what's happening in UK. So we and others are working very strongly across government through the various industry groups such as ADS, but also as individual companies to put a lot of pressure, I would rightly say. Part of that was helping to shape initially things like the furlough schemes, but also more longer term, what can we do to build and rebuild ready for Brexit, but also post-COVID. And MOD is going through its strategic reviews at the moment. We're all inputting to that. We've seen the investment by government into the OneWeb constellation, which, whilst Airbus is making, it's not actually an Airbus venture. I see that as really positive signs that UK is getting behind. There's clearly a lot more to do, and we'll continue to to push. Our different governments work in different ways in terms of their mandate to their different departments. So I think we'll see it in different outputs. But so far, I'm reasonably positive that the right approaches are happening, and we just need to keep pushing those to really see those through and make sure those investments, and from my perspective, particularly into space and the services around wider space, do come to fruition, and we build on the opportunities such as OneWeb to really generate new manufacturing, not just in the actual host satellite, but all the payloads and the follow-on services. If we look to navigation and the automation in UK, there's a huge opportunity for follow-on services companies, just as there are in Intel processing around navigation timing, as we look for a much more autonomous and potentially the world of flying cars. So a world of rich opportunity, but it does need good government support. That was all from me, Yasmin, so hopefully I've kept broadly to time. Now for some questions.
Yes, great. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. So thank you so much for that, Richard. It was a really, really great speech there, really great presentation as well. So we'll get straight on to the questions. So you guys can ask as many as you want. And we've got another 15 minutes now. So any questions, please ask in the Q&A section. So our first question today comes from James Marment, who says, I'd like to know, now that Airbus are actively pursuing UK MOD opportunities, what's their approach in regards to SMEs, who their SME champion is, and will that person be made available for SME supply chain access rather than like the other super primes that appear to only have one-way line of communication, which is to the authority rather than the supply chain?
Challenging as ever. It is always hard. So I mean, yes, we do have a lead for supply chain with engagement, particularly with SMEs. He's called Martin Lee, and he's martin.lee@airbus.com. Particularly around Skynet 5 and Skynet 6, the opportunity, we launched a new push to ask anyone that wants to be involved, and that you can see on our website, and we're part of a consortia for that opportunity. So that's not just with Airbus, that's with KBR, that's with Northrop Grumman, and also Kinetic. So that's a wider than just Airbus opportunity. So I think we are better than most. We are a large corporate, and I understand that can be challenging. We do really need that supply chain. So the onus is on us to engage as well as for you to want to be engaging with. And I understand the pace of some of these opportunities can be slow for SMEs. Many of our projects are 4 or 5 years, and whilst there are benchmark payments, a lot of them are more success-based. So we do try to find ways of making it a little bit faster on those engagements, and particularly on some of the R&D, a little bit more agile to routes to market. UK Space Agency also, though, has been doing quite a lot to try to help support and stimulate that demand, and just recently ran a competition to appoint, I think it was 10 small businesses with some grants of £100,000, £200,000 to try and stimulate new ideas in a wider range across sort of space. So that it's not just Airbus, there are others, routes to money as well, but we can help direct as well.
Great, thanks for that, Richard. So our next question comes from Chad Boulanger. Hopefully I've pronounced your surname there, Chad, correctly. But Chad says, hi Richard, have you used advanced technologies like AR in defence and space, and how do you see it going forward? In brackets, going to scale, just pilots, etc.
So yes, we are looking heavily at AI. There's AI on the Mars rover, doing that autonomous mapping. I see it can be useful in so many different ways in our business, in terms of faster developments, really trying to leap forward, and some of those, particularly the testing, the virtual world, trying to mimic. A lot of what I do ends up being the applications from the satellites, so the network management, looking at multiple bearers, how to manage a network better. AI is very well placed to help support. So we're embracing, really using it. Are we going to be an AI business, no, we're going to be somebody that uses AI, and we have to have a huge capability to do that. But I don't think it will be Airbus, the AI company of the future. We make platforms, we make good aeroplanes using the best techniques, and AI will certainly be one of those.
Ah, okay. My apologies, Richard. So Chad actually mentioned AR, not AI. So that was my fault
Right.
there. Sorry for that. So again, have you used advanced technologies like AR in defence and space, and how do you see it going forward? Apologies for that.
So AR
Augmented
being
reality. Sorry.
okay. So yeah, yes, again we do, and we're doing it a lot for training. In the manufacturing line, so that actually, genuine on aircraft manufacturing line, people are using it a lot in the training. I Yes, very much. I think digital is going to play an increased. I think that's one of the positives out of COVID. Actually, it's made us all a bit more familiar and confident with the whole digital way forward. I think it's made some of the, should we say, the more aged management have to really understand and embrace. And I think I'm hopeful that actually it really makes things move forward a bit more for that sort of adaptation. I think, there's also a need for still some of the hands-on as well, and you're never going to get away from that. But definitely more and more of it.
Yeah, most definitely. And I truly believe as well that COVID is pushing us in the right direction in terms of Industry 4 and smart factories and things like that. So definitely agree there. So our next question comes from Stephen Young, who asks, does Richard have a comment with regard to access to export licenses for the Middle East and or NATO ally Turkey?
Do I have a comment? So exports at the heart of our business. The majority of what we do, whilst we've got some proud UK projects, most of what we do is for export. Middle East is a key customer through UAE, Saudi Arabia. Recently, we've just had export to Turkey. It took 6-9 months, went through the high courts here, and then has been allowed. We will follow the export rules. We have a list of can't trade countries like everybody else, but we'll fully support UK in doing what it needs to do. And one of the things that we're really pushing for in advance for Brexit is that clarity on what will be our trading relationship in all these different countries, because that's going to be critical from a people perspective, but also goods in and out, as well as the final product. So I think that's one thing we're keeping a real watchful eye on.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so our next question, actually in relation to another one of our aerospace speakers as well. And Hope Miller asks, we've seen the aerospace industry halt to a near enough a standstill. How will the industry bounce back in terms of manufacturing and plans that may now be dead in the water?
So, as you say, it's a huge issue for aero, which is why I try to focus on space today, because it's easier to be really positive about space at the moment. Aero is going through really challenging times, and nowhere more than in Airbus. I think the knock-on impact then, of course, into the airlines themselves are, at the end of the day, our customers. If they don't survive, we don't survive. We've seen manufacturing now is at 40% of what it was a year ago. The estimates for when full recovery will happen widely vary. I think anyone that's vaguely pragmatic and is seeing this up and down of COVID is very much taking a slightly longer term, more measured approach to this. So 2023, 2024, assuming vaccines, etc. So yes, I mean, it's been very publicly stated in Airbus the sorts of numbers, but you are talking millions an hour of losses. That's had the unfortunate consequence on cost cutting, which has meant also downsizing of people, and we've seen the job cuts. We are very much though trying to preserve the core capabilities, keep the manufacturing, and have been strongly looking to say, so when we do see the pickup, what are the new technologies, what will drive new sales in the future? And of course, that leads us largely to green as environmental sales, electric planes, hydrogen planes, the future wings of tomorrow, which we're leading with out of sort of Filton and Broughton. So we're trying to use that opportunity to reset and keep going, but really it's as much about supporting our customers, the airlines, and making everyone confident to fly again, so that they create demand. And fingers crossed it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, fingers crossed, most definitely. Okay, so our next question comes from a Katie Feng, which is more of a sort of an advice sort of question. She asks, given your massive experience, Richard, what advice would you give to undergraduates or placement applicants at Airbus?
Please apply, firstly. So we're keeping going despite the job cuts. We do need an intake of young people. At the moment, the people tending to take voluntary retirement are obviously your older people, and as it is more digital, we need a good cadre of people coming through the business still. Undoubtedly there will be cuts across the board. Now, there'll be slight reductions, but we're really keen to keep this going. There's a huge array of opportunity for the apprentices and graduates in Airbus across the different disciplines, whether that be the networking, marketing, through straight to genuine engineering, manufacturing type roles. So I'd say please apply first of all. We want keen people, different ideas, people willing to make a difference. So
Great.
Put that bent forward.
Great. Hopefully that answered your question, Katie. Please apply. So our next question comes from Alex Chung, who asks, do you believe Concorde will ever make a comeback in some form that complies with the lower carbon future?
Concorde per se, no. I mean, there are people looking at the next commercial supersonic airliner. It's hard at the moment with the whole economics of travel to see it, but then who would have believed in spaceflight being a reality? We're on the cusp of it. If you look at the innovation coming in space at the moment, whether it's from the numbers of launches that we see, the constellations, the different types of missions being done in aero, the types and capabilities that planes can do today, maybe it's possible. It would be good to see again, wouldn't it? Who wants to sit for 12, 17, 20 hours going to Australia? But I also remember how noisy Concorde was when it flew over my house. So hopefully, as you say, a quiet green version.
Yeah, that's what we can hope for, if it does make a comeback, that is. So another question, again, this is also applies to another one of our aerospace speakers this week. But James Charlotte asks, the government has stated its intention for the UK to remove its membership of the European Aviation Safety Agency after Brexit. There is therefore a strong likelihood parts manufacturers in the UK would need certifying twice, first by the Civil Aviation Authority and then the EASA. Has any guidance been given by the government or the EU on this potential huge issue for the UK aerospace companies? And how does Richard think this will affect Airbus and the supply chain?
So this is not my pet topic, but we have been working very hard with the different agencies to try to minimise the impact of things like this. So we want to try and avoid any duplication, if at all possible, because it just adds cost to not just UK, but Europe as a whole as an exporting group, which even if we're trying to be in a part of, it's just an extra burden upon us all. So we're very much trying to make it as streamlined as possible. We have to wait and see quite where we end up.
Okay, thanks for that, Richard. So it looks like our last and final question comes from Gary Scott, who asks, can you see the use of more recyclable / sustainable materials used in the structural aerospace and defence applications, i.e. composite materials such as flax and hemp?
Don't know about flax and hemp, but definitely more recyclable, more reusable is it's key. More and more of what we're doing in the manufacturing cycle is got a real bent to that. We've all got our huge targets on recycling from everything that we're doing in the factory, in the office environment. And I think when you look to the plane, one of the challenges is at the moment, whilst we're moving away from metals to carbon, it's the ability to do recycling of carbon is a key thing that we need to look at and see what we can do more of as we go forward. And I think as you move towards 3D printing type technologies, that potentially allows more of that. So yeah, definitely something that's key on the agenda and we'll keep looking at more of.
Great. Perfect. Thank you so much for today, Richard. It's been a really insightful speech and presentation. And we've had so many attendees today and they've had so many questions. So thank you again for being part of the event. And Amy Deacon's just literally commented, really interesting. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for your presentation today. Some interesting subjects covered and good value. So it seems everybody was engaged and really enjoyed the speech. So thank you again. But before we wrap up today, I just wanted to mention that we have our virtual drink session from 3 till 4 today, which a lot of our exhibitors and delegates are attending. So I'll send that to yourself, Richard, and I'll also pop it in the chat here on the side, so that if anybody would like to attend, please go to that. It may be your opportunity to talk to Richard if he's able to attend today. The other thing I'd just like to mention is that we have a bike competition on our LinkedIn at the moment. So you have the chance to win a £750 bike from Brompton Bike if you're interested in that.
How do I apply?
So all you have to do is head to backinbritain.com and pick your favorite stand and post it on LinkedIn and then tag 5 people in there and you'll have the chance to win. So definitely take that opportunity.
I'm in.
Yes. Fingers crossed. Good luck to you. But thank you again, everybody, for attending today. It's been such a great turnout again for another great event with one of our industry leaders. So thanks again, Richard, and I hope to see you at Virtual Drinks.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Richard. Bye-bye.
Bye.